All right, folks, welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I'm your host, Justin, here with a quick word before we dive in. Now, in this episode, I chat with actor and talk show host Barry Gordon about life as a child star, leaving his law practice for the stage, starring alongside the great Carroll O'Connor in Archie Bunker's Place, Ninja Turtles, of course, SWAT KATS, and more. As always, thank you all for listening out there. And without further ado, here you go. All right, Barry. So take us back in time. You're a youngster. Are you a
Okay.
book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all of the above?
Book reader.
Let's start there then. What sort of books? Did you have a genre or an author that you liked?
Almost all nonfiction. A lot of books on politics. One of the first full books I read when I don't know, about 10 or 11 was Profiles in Courage. It was written by John Kennedy before he became president. I've just always been interested in that, and I still am. I still read hundreds of books on government and politics, and I'm really fascinated by it. Always have been.
I could tell just behind you is that's what's behind you is your nonfiction collection.
Yeah, that's what you're looking at, right? That's
Uh,
right. Well, some of it, though, it's not all political. I also have another love, which is musical theater. So a lot of it is also about musical theater. And then I taught acting for a while at Cal State LA in the graduate program. So some of those books are about that. But the great majority of them, yeah, are political.
Whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in LA. I mean, I was born in Brookline, Massachusetts. And then I had an early career as a kid in New York City, starting when I was about 4. By the time I was 7, I did my first movie out here, and that brought us out here. And then we never left, except I went back for a year or so to do a play and a movie in New York. But other than that, my home's been here.
So were either your parents or someone in your family, were they creatively, artistically inclined? Is that where the roots came from?
I don't know where the roots came from. I honestly don't. My mother wasn't. My father was a radio announcer
Ah,
in Albany, New York, and a fairly middling singer, but never a professional singer. And I think my career kind of started because dad would bring home records and put me to sleep to them and pat me in rhythm, which was always fun. And I just started singing at around, gosh, probably before I was a year old. I was singing
wow.
something. I spoke very early, so yeah, so I was singing, and once I could walk, I'd go around to the neighbors and sing, and that was kind of how that all started. It was weird. There was a show at the time called the Ted Mack Amateur Hour. It was actually started on radio by a guy named Major Bose. It was called the Major Bose in the 20s and 30s. And then Ted Mack took it over, and it was on television. And it was kind of like American Idol. They would tour the country looking for people. And a neighbor submitted my name. I was 3 years old, and we got a letter saying you've been invited to audition for the show. And of course, I wanted to go, so Dad took me, and that all kind of kicked off everything.
Wow. So do you still sing or perform or anything?
I do. I do. I love singing. I don't sing as much. My voice, when you get to be in your mid 70s, the voice is not what it was. So I'm not doing as much of it, but I really enjoy it. I've always enjoyed singing and writing.
Hmm.
And so, that's another side of me that I like to nourish when I can.
Did you play any instruments or anything? Were you just a vocalist?
Guitar.
Guitar. Okay.
Yeah.
Still play that?
Yeah. I play very bad piano, only to hit chords and to be able to write. But but I've never really learned piano, but guitar I play, rhythm guitar, not lead, but rhythm guitar.
Gotcha. So, I usually like to ask, when you were growing up, what were some formative films and TV shows that stick out? But you were by the three, you were in the films and TV shows.
I was on the TV shows. I mean, it was very strange. From the Ted Mack Amateur Hour, I got hired to do a show called Star Time Kids that was made up of all kids, but it was out of New York City. So we moved to New York City when I was 4. And then I did a lot of the shows that I used to watch, like Jackie E. Gleason and Milton Berle and all of those shows. And I did them when I was 4 or 5 because I was sort of, I mean, I guess I was an oddity, because I was singing at 4, and so that kind of got the attention of some of these big variety shows, and they'd bring me on. So I'd do a song and do a sketch, and doing a sketch is kind of how I learned acting.
uh,
That was sort of the start of that part of it. And then by the time I was 8, I didn't do any singing anymore on TV or film. That was all acting then. It all became acting. So
would you say that you had more fun as a kid singing or acting?
good question, Justin. I would say equal.
Mm,
I would say equal. Because in a way, the way my dad kind of guided me through singing, he was sort of my singing coach. And the way my dad guided me was very much as you would guide an actor, because he always started from what does this song mean? And what are the feelings that are created by this song? And how do you feel about this song? And he did that with me from a very, very early age. It was a kind of an unusual approach, but that was his approach, where he felt that the feeling dictated the way you sang a song. He's a smart dude.
yeah, and obviously you don't. That's not a normal upbringing for a child. How does this
No.
affect your schooling? Are you still going to school? Are you doing private schooling or?
They wanted me to have as normal a life as I could.
Mm,
And thank God for that, because they really did want that, and that's why I was so fortunate, and I never really fell into some of the patterns that other child actors fell into.
mhm,
But there were a couple of reasons for that, I think. One was that I was not really a star of like a show, like a Dennis the Menace or something. So I didn't have that weight on me, um, at a young age, and I was more of a character actor.
okay.
So I'd be playing, an Italian kid one week and an Arab kid one week and a French kid another week, and learn to do dialects very early, and so that I think was a more grounding experience. And then my parents, I mean, yes, there were times when I had to go to what was called a professional school, which is a private school that accommodates kids who are in the business. There are 2 in New York that I ended up going to at various times. One is called Professional Children's School, and that's what I went to when I was very, very young. And then there's a high school called Quintano's, and when I was doing a Broadway show there, and then the movie A Thousand Clowns, then I would go to school there. But other than that, I went to Beverly Hills School when we were living there, public school, public high school, West LA when we were living there. So yeah, mostly it was a public school education.
Okay. So, Thousand Clowns, you were nominated for a Tony for that, right?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
old were you?
When I was nominated, I was 13.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a just a wild idea.
It was, yeah, it was, and it was fun. Going to the Tony Awards was really a kick. That was great fun. I did not expect to win because I had a major competitor, fellow little known guy named Alan Arkin, but that was his first major role.
Wow.
And it was interesting because it was a show called Enter Laughing, as I recall. It was written by Carl Reiner, who I later got to work with. The thing is that, they have categories, and Alan was the lead in that show. He was never off the stage, but he didn't have a big name. And there were a lot of big other names, Broadway names in that show. So they all got top billing. And then it said, and Alan Arkin. So because he got that billing, they put him in the supporting actor category instead of the lead actor category. And I knew I didn't have a prayer because, because he was the show. I
Yeah,
mean, you ain't going to beat that. So that was, I never expected to win, but it was such a thrill to be nominated, and it was really great.
that's a great story. So I take it stage fright was never an issue.
No, it really wasn't. Yeah, it I've thought about that, but it wasn't even an issue when I was a little kid because I just thought I was having fun,
Mm, yeah.
and the people were enjoying it was, great, but I was having fun. So no, now when you get to be older and you have to make a living at it, but I still wouldn't call it stage fright. I always, the business can get you down at times. The business side of it can get you down at times because no matter how successful you are, there's still more rejection than success. It's like a batting average, right? It's 300 is good, and that's only a third of the time that you're getting a hit.
Yeah.
So rejection is a normal part of the business. But I never had any fear about the work.
Do you still perform on stage at all? Any plays?
Yeah, yeah. Well, as you know, because you probably know, I am retired, so I've kind of ended the rat race. I decided in my early 60s that, I'd built up great pensions. My wife has a great career in a whole other place,
Hmm.
nothing to do with show business. And so I kind of said, yeah, I think I've been performing for almost 60 years. I think I'm done. But I wasn't done. I wasn't done performing. And my great outlet has been a little theater here in Pasadena, not known by a lot of people, but the people that know it love it. It's called Parsons Nose Theater. It's a 40-seat house. And all professional actors, great actors who, you've seen in commercials or you've seen doing episodic TV. They're just really, really talented. And then younger actors too, who are just coming up. And we've been doing now it's about 20 years old. I joined it about 10 years ago. And we do abridged versions of classic theater.
Mm.
So, like I did a 90-minute Merchant of Venice and played Shylock, So I'm getting to do roles that I never thought I'd do in my life, Huck Finn's father. I mean, it's a huge range of roles that I've had a chance to do, and a lot of dialect roles, and so I have a ball with that. It's called Parsons Nose Theater. It is a great theater. And now we're kind of known a little bit to the universe because during the pandemic, we decided to do like radio podcasts of these
Wow.
shows. And there are about 40 of them on our channel, and people go and listen because it works a lot like radio theater, and it worked. So people are writing to us from all over the country and parts of the world, having listened to our shows.
You can't retire that creative itch you need to scratch.
No, no, you can't. You really can't. So that I won't do. And of course, I had a great time unexpectedly after I retired when a friend of mine asked me if I'd ever considered teaching acting, which I'd never had. And he asked me to teach initially acting for television in the graduate program at Cal State LA, and then that extended to acting for stage and film, and so I had a great time doing that for what 9 years or so. Yeah.
Wow. So just sticking on teaching for a minute, what would you say is the A common pitfall that most young acting students fall into.
Another great question, Justin. You have a bunch of them. Uh, I think the most common pitfall is acting. The most common pitfall is thinking you have to act and not just be in the
Mm.
moment, because that's what they kind of have to get over. And especially for film, because you better never act on film. Because you can see that, you can absolutely see when someone's acting and when someone's just being in the moment. And you have to convince a lot of people when you act in a role that you're that person, but the first person you have to convince is yourself. So that's sort of where it starts. And if you're in it, and if you're taking it off of the other person who's also just being in the moment, then that's the magic of acting. That's what it is, and you've got to do all of that and hit your marks and everything else.
Don't forget your
So I
lines.
always think of acting as schizophrenic,
Yeah.
because one side is the mechanical saying yes, and I've got to go there, and then I have to do it, and I can't take any more time over there, and I have to do, and you get that in your head. You should get that in your head, frankly, first. That's the other thing that I told my students is preparation is everything. All of that stuff that you learn in rehearsal, that's the muscle memory. That should just be reflex. That should just be unconscious. But if you don't know your words, and if you don't know all of these things, then you can't become unconscious. Then all you're thinking about is what is my next line. But if it's unconscious, then you never have to think about that again. And then you just have the thoughts that the character would have at that moment. But it is schizophrenic. You've got to
Hmm.
deal with both of those things at the same time. But the easiest way to do it is preparation. Because if you know your lines backwards and forwards, if you've done the actor work of that, then you can just be. And I was never kind of a guy that said, you've got to go write a character biography for yourself. I mean, if it helps you, if it works for you, fine. But I was always an actor that was just in the moment, you
Hmm.
know. The one thing I wanted to know is, where am I coming from? What is my back? Where did I walk in from? What has happened to me as this character so far?
Right.
Now, I don't have to necessarily go back 20 years to do that. I just have to know, what happened to me in the beginning of this show,
Right.
and you walk in with that. But to me, that's, yeah, I think those are the kind of things that I found were the hardest to get through, folks. Although it was a graduate program, so they'd had a lot of experience acting before I got to them, and and they were some pretty talented people. So.
We're kind of dancing on this subject already because, speaking with actors over the years, I kind of figured that each actor has their own method that they piece together from elsewhere and it's kind of specific to them. So, what's your
Absolutely.
method?
Well, again, learn it,
Hmm.
know it really, really, really well. Know who the character is, who the writer intends the character to be, because usually the cues are in the script, and then just go and play it. Just go and do it. Just be in the moment. Listen to the other person, actively listen, not have your mind on other things, and just so I never really, that's why I never thought I could teach acting,
Mm.
because I never really had acting classes. I had a few at UCLA when I first went to college, but then I had to drop out because I was working so much. So I went back to school in my mid to late 30s, but this time I went in political science instead of film and theater, and I loved that. And then that led to my getting a law degree. That led to me being a lawyer for a hot 3 years, learning that I hated it and going back to acting. But it also, I mean, while I was at Cal State LA, I also taught classes in the First Amendment and media law and political media. So I was able to kind of nurture both sides of me, the books back there, as well as the the acting side. So
Plus, I could really see, the stage presence you learn from being an actor being very helpful in court.
Yeah, yeah. But it's what's not helpful is well, I mean, I'm going to be really brutally honest. Um, you have to have a you have to have an instinct to go for the jugular when you're a lawyer, and I didn't.
Mm.
I just didn't. And I would have clients who would say, I want you to get that person because I was, a litigator, and I want you to get them, and I'd listen to the case, and I'd say to myself, this person doesn't have much of a case.
Right.
But I still had to represent him or her or, them, and I still had to do it, and on occasion it became annoying.
Yeah, I could see, I
So,
could see that.
so yeah, I decided it was more fun playing one on TV.
Yeah, yeah. Barry, I want to ask you about one of my favorite actors of all time that you work quite a bit with is Carroll O'Connor.
Yeah.
What memories do you have of him, working on Archie Bunker's Place?
I have wonderful memories of him. I he was a person, I mean he would not brook incompetence. He did not like people who were incompetent. I was fortunate. I had a great relationship with him, and a completely accidental one. I don't know if you know the story.
I don't.
You probably don't know, but very few people do. But I was at home and I got a call from a friend of mine who had directed me. Well, actually, he was the associate director for the most part on a show called Fish that I was on with Abe Vigoda. And he had become a director and on Archie Bunker's Place. And I got a call about 9 o'clock at night saying, we have an emergency. And I said, Gary, what? What's going on? He said, well, I'm directing an episode of Archie Bunker's Place. And there's a character, one of his lawyers, all his lawyers are all named Rabinowitz. It's Rabinowitz, 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 and Rabinowitz. And they were going with the younger Rabinowitz. And so I got a call and they said they had just fired their younger Rabinowitz, and could I come in tomorrow and shoot? So usually you get days of rehearsal and no rehearsal. That was it. And it was one scene. And normally I don't leap at that, doing one short scene. It was just a few pages. But they said Carroll O'Connor. So they said the scene's with Carroll. And I said, I'm there. I'll do it. So I went in and it was just one scene. And I did the scene. And I guess they liked it a lot. And Carroll liked it a lot. And we had a really good rapport. And before I knew it, a couple of weeks later, they said, well, there's another Rabinowitz episode, and we want you to come in for that. And I ended up doing like 6 that season. And then the next season, which ended up being the last season of Archie Bunker's Place, I was on, most of the shows. So became a regular on the show. But that's how that happened. It was just a complete accident. But Carroll was a joy because he's so professional. He's so good. He's so funny. And again, you don't have to force anything with him. He is Archie. He was Archie. And the fun thing about that role is that very first scene, I went toe to toe with him. The whole point was you can't be intimidated. My character could not be intimidated by him. And I had to give as good as I got.
Hmm.
And I think that's what they were looking for. So that became that character. So it was fun.
And at that time, for people who aren't familiar with Carroll O'Connor, maybe younger listeners, he's probably one of the biggest stars in the world.
Yes. Yes.
Just right off All in the Family, which was,
Well, he
what it,
just went into your living room every
yeah.
week, on one of the most iconic sitcoms ever. All in the Family was just a groundbreaking show. which kind of started what that's another thing I taught was the history of television. But there was something that was started to be called the second golden age of television. And it happened first in sitcoms with All in the Family, with the Mary Tyler Moore Show, where suddenly it was really sitcoms that broke new ground, while Rockford Files and those shows were what those shows were, and Mannix and all of those cop shows, they were just what they were. So they weren't really breaking new ground. But in the 70s, sitcoms broke new ground. Julia, which was the first black lead, and there were so many shows that broke ground, like All in the Family, like Mary Tyler Moore, which was really the first feminist show on television, where she didn't feel she had to be married,
Right.
and so that then the ground was broken in the 80s with shows like Hill Street Blues and St. Elsewhere on the dramatic side. But yeah, I mean, All in the Family is and Carroll O'Connor, it's the story about Archie Bunker, because naturally they thought they were writing it for liberals, sending up conservatives, but frankly, a huge percentage of that audience were people who identified with Archie Bunker.
Yes.
And so they were really able to cross that they didn't expect to. And I don't even know if they wanted to, but they
They
did.
did.
And so All in the Family became that huge hit, I think, because there were people that were able to laugh at Archie Bunker, but then there were people that were able to laugh with Archie Bunker
Right.
and see his perspective. So, it was fascinating.
That's a mark of great writing.
Yeah. Yes. Whether they knew it or not. Because, well, it's also a mark of the fact that they never made him, they always somehow made him a very, very sympathetic character, a character that you could empathize with. Yes, that is a mark of great writing and acting.
This is probably cool for some people my age who may just know you from, you have the shirt on, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Mutant and proud. That's what it says. This was actually made and given to me by a fan at one of our cons, a lady named Braden. And she comes to several of our cons, and she's been just an incredible fan. And she made these for us in our colors. And
Wow, that's great.
nifty. Yeah, I love it.
You had almost been working you had a whole lifetime of a career by the time Ninja Turtles rolls around. What do you remember about the initial audition?
That it was very much like other
Hmm.
auditions. The one thing I do remember is my agent called. I had never heard of the comic, and so my agent called and said, "Okay, you're going to go down. You're going to read for a show called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles." And I don't remember if it was Voice Caster or one of those. There used to be, before the age of self-tape, you used to go somewhere and actually, record an audition. And so they said, you're going to do, a thing called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I said, well, what are you smoking? Because what are you talking about? And he said, no, no, no. He said, it's called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I said, okay, that's going to last 5 minutes. And then I went down and I auditioned, and we all had to record all four roles.
Wow.
So we all did a Leonardo and a Michelangelo and a Raphael and everyone that auditioned. But I have to say that they had pictures, they had of the characters, and I read the dialogue, the little bit of dialogue that we had to read for each character, and I said, "This is fun. There's something fun about this." But I still thought it was only going to last for 5 minutes because I'd done other cartoons that I thought were real fun, and they lasted 5 minutes. So, I mean, I did a cartoon at Hanna-Barbera called Gravedale, yeah, Gravedale High, and the lead was Rick Moranis.
Wow.
And and I mean, it was one great actor after the other in that room. And I said, "Oh, this is my guy." That 5 minutes, we were barely on for a season. So I didn't have necessarily high hopes, but I knew that it was something pretty good. And even though we read for all four, when I left, I remember saying, "Gee, I hope I get Donatello because he's the guy. He's the nerd. I'm the nerd. I'm that guy. He's that guy on a science level,
Yeah.
and engineering level." So I said, "Yeah, I want to play him." And the other thing is, when I did it, the voice caster in the room, I kind of did this geeky voice, right? And he said, "No, no, no." He said, "Just use your own voice for this character." And I thought, "Oh, great. My own voice is geeky. That's what he's telling me." But okay, I'll do that. And I just used my own voice. I always did. I heard to do my own voice. It was fun. And then I met the greatest cast of people in the world and the sweetest group of people in the world, including the late great James Avery and my four buds and Renee and Peter Renaday and Pat Fraley, and then later Jim Cummings when James left to do Fresh Prince. And it's just I'd worked with Rob on a show before. I'd worked with him on the Snorks, but Cam was new to me. Townie was new to me, and my God, did we have fun! Unbelievable time for 193 episodes, and we just had a great time. And then when Rob came to us 10 years ago and said, "You want to do some Comic Cons with us?" And, there's times when they need all four. And I thought, well, I'm getting old. Even back then I was 65. And I said, I'll come if they need all four. So I'm like the last call they make. If they need all four, they call me and say, "Can you do it?" And if I can possibly do it, I do it. And this year we're doing 13 of them.
Wow.
But what's so great is the fun that came back to us. And and now it's the text threads that are going every day, and the fans that we're connecting with, but also the fact that, as I say in panels, I have four brothers and a sister,
Yeah.
and I'm an only child, but now I'm not. And it is just so great to have them in my life. And again, after a long time, we'd lost track for about 25 years, but it's pretty amazing.
I've had the pleasure of speaking with Townsend and Rob, and I get that from all three of you guys, is that you guys are the really truly friends.
Yes,
Because
yeah. In fact, we all went to see Rob uh, when he did his Animaniacs concert. He did it out here in Malibu, and we heard about it a lot, but we never got to see it. And so we, Cam and Renee and her husband, and me and my wife, and Townie and his lady, and we all piled in, and took cars and went and had dinner together, and then saw him. So yeah, there's a life away from the cons now, which is just really, really, really wonderful. I co-wrote with a great fellow named Gary Lamb, another friend, but I co-wrote a musical review called A Complete History of the American Musical in 90 Minutes or Less. And we did it at Parsons Nose, and the guys all came. It was great. It was
wow.
great. Yeah.
You mentioned that all of you guys had to, do all of the turtles. And Townsend said that the comp they gave him for Mikey was Sean Penn and the name is escaping me. Just the movie
Yeah. And Fast Times at Ridgemont
Fast
High.
Times. Right, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get any of those comps for any of the turtles?
No,
Mm,
no, I didn't. And I mean, Kevin has since said to me, that we heard you and we said that's Donatello.
yeah.
So, with my own voice. So I just, so no, I mean, I never did. And it's interesting because I watched the 2012 where Rob is Donatello.
Yeah.
He's a very different Donatello than I was.
He is.
He has a kind of a short fuse, and actually, it's yeah. I mean, it's very different. But that's what I think makes Turtles really special is that each iteration has brought something to the table, whether you like it, whether you don't like it. And that was Kevin's design, right? Because, I mean, frankly, when the first movie came out, our first question was to ourselves, well, why didn't we do the voice?
Yeah.
you know, but
That's what
that
we
was
were
by,
expecting as kids of that era. We thought that that would be the same.
yeah, but Kevin wanted every iteration to be different. And that held until a few years ago when we all got to reunite to do, well, first Transdimensional Turtles, but then we got to reunite to do some video games. But we're still the 80s cartoon Turtles. So the animation is the 80s cartoon Turtles. And we've never, other than Rob, we've never done anything other than that. And I think that's smart because each iteration reaches a different generation a different way.
Yes.
And that's what I think has led to the longevity of this franchise.
And people that were watching the original generation are now having kids and making their kids watch the original. It just keeps living.
And sometimes we see all three generations at those cons in one family. It is
Yeah.
so crazy and wonderful. But yeah.
So, Barry, another one of your voice roles that played a prominent role in my childhood is Razor from SWAT Cats.
Yeah. Also my own voice, but with a little gravel.
That was a very cool show. Now, it didn't last quite as long as Ninja Turtles, but I just
Oh,
want to
two
let you know I
seasons.
enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, you reminded me of something. I wish I had it. But it's sitting over there. Can I run and get
Yeah,
it?
sure, sure. Go ahead.
All right. There
Oh,
it is.
there he is.
A fan made this
Wow. I was going to ask
and
if,
gave it to me
yeah.
at the last con. She made it completely out of whole cloth, no model, no nothing. She made this. Is this the coolest
It
thing?
is. And that's just what's cool in general about, acting or voice acting in general. Even though it wasn't a huge success like Ninja Turtles, you never know what's going to touch somebody when and what it's
No.
going to do for them.
But I get a lot of requests. I started carrying just a few SWAT Kats prints. Just one pose really with me and T-Bone and I started carrying that saying, if anyone wants it, because I have a couple of Star Trek things too. So I
Hmm.
bring those and I thought, well, and I like they're gone.
Need some more.
And I said, oh, I guess I'm gonna have to bring more than that because yeah, a lot of folks at the con really, really liked SWAT Kats, which is thrilling. I mean, and I did too. I thought it was one of the best almost crossovers, kind of pre-anime crossover. It started that happening, and Hanna-Barbera was certainly not known for that, but it almost had that vibe,
Yeah, it
and it
did.
had story arcs. I mean, it had long story arcs, and it was a pretty cool show. And of course, another great person who's not with us anymore, Gary Owens, who an amazing human being, also a lovely cast, just a great cast on that show too. So, and Jim Cummings.
Yeah, I thought I was going to say, I think
So
Jim
yeah,
Cummings was on that as well.
yeah, yeah. Lori Allen and Tress. Yeah, it was a terrific group of people. So I've been fortunate. I really have. But of course, Turtles is Turtles,
Yeah,
10
but
years.
yeah.
So that, on a level of its own.
So when it comes to SWAT Cats and Ninja Turtles, how much of that was done? I guess it's called ensemble, with all you guys together.
It was all done that
Mm.
way. In fact, Justin, I would say to a fault, it was done that way. And let me explain that with Turtles. Because, and you may already have guessed this, but if you could not be in the same room on that given day, they replaced you
Wow, I didn't know that.
and they didn't re record.
I did not know that at all.
It's not like they temporarily replaced you. So at one point, well, during a lot of it, I was president of the Screen Actors Guild. from 80, what was it, 88 to 95. So it would have been like the last 3, 4 years that I was president of the guild, and I would have to travel. And so sometimes I'd have to miss a show. And I would say, well, I can record the lines live, while here. I can grab a studio in New York because I'd be like in New York negotiating a commercials contract. And I'd say, I can, just get out and grab it. And no, we'll replace you for that. And they did. So you'll hear maybe 5, 6 episodes out of the 193 that it's not my Donatello.
Do you know who it was that replaced you?
I do. A fellow named Greg Berg.
When would you say that shifted the ensemble to more individual booth work? When did that just go out the window?
I honestly don't know. Because I was kind of out by then, but I can take a good guess of one of the factors. Probably not the only factor, but I can take a good guess. And the guess that I would take would be, once they started to use stars in animated films, you weren't going to get them in the same room very frequently because of their schedules. And so I think they started to adapt to that. And then I think it became the norm.
Okay.
But exactly how that happened, I'm not sure. And I do think that something's lost. I really do.
Yeah.
That's why I think Seth Rogen, when he did, now he might have done ensemble in Turtles. That I don't know, because I remember he said when he did the CGI Lion King, he said that he had to work with who played the other he played but at any rate, he said he had to work with that person in the same room. Had to, because you just don't get the bounce. You don't, and we did some improvising,
It was Billy Eichner, sorry.
Oh, right. Right. And we did some improvising, and when we did Turtles, because we had that ability and we could bounce off of each other. And if you're just doing it wild in a room, you can't do that.
Right. I agree completely. What would you say is the best acting advice that you've been given, and who gave it to you?
Wow. I don't know if it was any one piece of advice, because I've been able to learn from so many incredible people. Right from the time I was like 5 years old, I was on the Milton Berle show, and he would give me comedy tips and, wait for the laugh, but don't wait until it's dead, little, kind of things like that weren't overall acting tips, but, really interesting. I just think working with people like that, working with God, when I was 9, I got to work with an iconic actor from the 1930s, Charles Lawton, and he played my grandfather. And you learn by watching. I think, at least I did, and I had such a tapestry of choices to learn from. People like Sidney Pollack, who became a great director, and he was an actor when I worked with him, and he and I had a co-lead in an Alfred Hitchcock Presents. So just that's kind of how I learned,
Hmm.
was more that, and seeing what they do. And most great actors, and this might sound really weird, and I won't say all, because I think the method has changed certain things, but most great actors, probably Meryl Streep, I don't know, but they don't think about it too much. And you certainly don't think about it while you're doing it. If you're thinking about it while you're doing it, you're not doing it. So, I mean,
It's like shooting a basketball. You're not thinking about how to actually shoot the basketball. You're just shooting the
exactly right.
basketball.
That's why I've been terrible at it. I cannot learn golf,
Mm.
because all that's happening in my head in golf is, is my arm right, is my shoulder and a thing, and everything, and can I do it? And I think, and no, I can't do it. If I let go of all that and learn the mechanics, and then say, maybe I could be better, but I'm not trying anymore. But something I did give up on. But yeah. But yeah, I think watching and just observing these folks who, I mean, Jason Robards, who I got to work with, for over a year in A Thousand Clowns, on stage, and then do the movie with him, and watching him, it's just so effortless, just so free. You wouldn't see him backstage going, what am I going to do now? No, you'd see him backstage schmoozing with everyone, having fun with everyone, talking, laughing. Then the curtain goes up and he walks on and he's Murray, and that's all you have to know, you
Right,
know? And sometimes as easy as that.
right.
Sometimes it is, and you don't have to work that hard at it. But I know there are actors that do and get great results, and I know there are actors who, like Daniel Day-Lewis, become that person off stage as well as on stage, and have to, and that works for them, and they're brilliant. So that's fine. But I don't know if they're any more brilliant than, for example, going back to before my generation, going back to Katharine Hepburn, going back to Spencer Tracy, going back to James Stewart. More brilliant? I don't know. Brilliant in a different way. And they didn't work so hard at it and played every facets of emotions and knew how to do it.
That's like the old Olivier Dustin Hoffman story. Why don't you try acting? I think they were doing a play together, Olivier and Dustin Hoffman, and
No, they were doing a movie
a
together, and
movie.
I forget
Right,
what
right.
movie it was. It was Marathon Man.
Dustin Hoffman had stayed up all night, to get into the role, and Olivier just looks at him and says, "Why don't you try acting?" or something along those lines.
Or just saying the lines.
Yeah.
Just say the line. I know.
Both great actors
I
got
know.
their
Well, but they're both great
yeah.
in their own way. Right? I mean, you certainly, if that works for Dusty, then that works for Dustin. Um, but I never, I guess because I started so young.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never really, I mean, my father gave me the best acting advice. Going back to your question, now I can answer it. It was my father that gave me the best acting advice. And it simply was, how does this make you feel in this moment? And he didn't even know he was giving good advice. He was just, he was just saying, he did it with singing. How does this make you feel at this moment? How does this? He made sure that my emotions were always connected to what I was doing. So it wasn't an intellectual exercise, but it also wasn't a rote exercise. I would see, kid actors being trained by their parents when I would work with them. And, it would be, okay, now, Tommy, say, the sky is blue today. And they'd have to go, the sky is blue today. And my dad would just say, if that was the line, he said, well, how would, what do you think about it? How would you say that? you sky's blue today, so,
It was like, "You're the kid, tell me."
you know, so that was the best advice I ever got. And I think that started me on a road of just being there without Stanislavski, because he didn't know who the hell Stanislavski was. He'd
Right.
never heard of Stanislavski, but his instinct was that there's something in you, and how do these words make you feel? What do they provoke in you?
Well said,
And
Dad.
thanks, Dad.
So, Barry, out of all the projects you've worked on, stage, screen, booth, what have you, what would you say was the most challenging role or character that you've played? Is there one you lost sleep over?
None that I lost sleep over. All of them have been interesting and fun, some more than others. Thousand Clowns was an incredible opportunity because it was a big role on stage, and I hadn't done that before, although I had done stage before, but not on Broadway. And my first stage appearance was a musical
Hmm.
that I did in San Francisco with it was Annie Get Your Gun that I played Little Jake with Mary Martin and John Raitt in the leads, and that was a treat. Okay, challenging. Probably Shylock in that little theater. Shakespeare takes some work.
Yeah.
Got to work with Shakespeare. And I would say probably that. But again, Shakespeare is also words that provoke emotions. And the work there is understanding the words. And
Yeah.
then once you understand the words, then again, letting go of it and just attaching them to what you feel. So it's no different in that sense, but it's work. I would say that was a huge challenge. Didn't lose sleep over it, but it was a great challenge and great fun to do. And that I really loved. Never thought I would have an opportunity to do that, but I did. So
Well, Barry, just to wind down here, this is a question I like to wrap up with. Have you ever had an experience that you would consider supernatural, paranormal, or an event you can't explain?
no, well, that
Mm?
I can't explain. No, but there has been something weird, but I wouldn't call it supernatural or paranormal, but it is something I can't explain, which is that my wife and I keep bumping into my first wife and her husband in the most bizarre places because they live in Northern California. We live in Southern California. And we have bumped into them. We laugh about it. It's like a Twilight Zone. We have bumped into them in London when we were there for a week, in New York when we were there for a week, in Las Vegas when we were there for a week. It is so weird. We just all of a sudden I look across in a city that they would should never be in, and I look over and I say, that's my that's Lenore and Gil. And usually we end up having dinner, lunch, and
That is weird.
that is weird. That's weird. I don't know if it's supernatural. I don't know if it's paranormal, but it's freaking weird.
A strange
And
coincidence. We'll put it under
that
that.
is a freaking coincidence. Yeah, but it's happened now 3 times. So in 3 different places. So it's kind of strange.
It'd be different if it was,
But other than that, we don't see them hardly.
gonna take a
So
vacation to go see him.
take a vacation somewhere unexpected. We're going to Japan in October, and I would not be surprised to see them in Japan.
Oh, that's great. Well, Barry, just to put a bow on this thing, is there anything on the horizon that you want to throw out there? Any plays coming
Yeah,
up? Or
Dragon Con
Dragon Con?
coming up. And then 2 weeks later, Granite Con in Manchester, New Hampshire. And they're actually going to have a 40th anniversary of the comic book. And we understand that we know Kevin Eastman is going to be there. And we believe that it's even a possibility that Peter Laird is going to be there, but he never goes. So it could be that Eastman and Laird are both going to be there. But because the show, as you probably you junkies know out there, turtle junkies, um, the comic book originated in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to where it originated at Granite Con, and we're going to be there September. Well, it's 2 weeks after, so it's like September 20th, something like around the weekend of that, whatever that weekend is. We will be there.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's what's coming up. And then in November, Motor City, and then it starts all over again next year.
That's great. Well, Barry, just thank you for giving me some of your time, man. I really appreciated talking to you.
It's a pleasure, Justin. I had a lot of fun. Great questions.
Thank you.
Really made me think.